Good evening, and welcome to day 13 of the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival, presented by Associated Bank. I'm Dante McFadden, he, him, his. I am the Black Lens programmer for Milwaukee Film, and this is the Nightcap. Before we get started with the conversation, I just have a few pieces of housekeeping. As you've seen, we have a double up challenge happening. Thanks to the generosity of Susan and Bob Michelet, if we raise $75,000 during the festival, they will double it. Text DOUBLEUP to 44321 or go to mkefilm.org/donate to donate, or go to mkefilm.org/members to become a member and help us meet our goal. And speaking of the members, Milwaukee Film, we couldn't do what we do, especially during these times where we've had to shift from in-person to virtual programming, for the previous festival and this year's festival, and other things we've been doing throughout the year, such as Black History Month and Women's History Month, and with our upcoming Pride programming. Without the support of our members, members get access to free films throughout the year, discounts on tickets, passes, and more. Plus, our members keep the nonprofit Milwaukee Film going. If you think this sounds appealing, please join us. If you're already a member, thank you, and please help us spread the word. To see our full slate of events and films, go to mkefilm.org/MFF. And remember, wherever you're watching, watch these conversations, drop your questions in the comments in the chat or in the comments section, and we'll pull them into the conversation. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I will begin by talking about Ludi, and I like to call the team behind the film forward to join me. Good evening.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Well, thank you for making this film. Thank you for your contributions, and thank you for allowing the Milwaukee Film Festival to screen it. It truly is an honor. So I'm going to begin by asking you all to say who you are, how you're involved in the film, and anything else you want the audience to share, to know, I should say.
Dante, will you tell us who's starting, or should we just all volunteer?
Oh, we could start with Edson, the director.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Edson Jean, he, him, his, and I am the director of Ludi. And this is my stray cat.
Hi. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Chez Mon Premier, I play Ludi, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
I'm Fabiola Rodriguez. I am the producer of Ludi.
Thank you. Once again, appreciate you all being here. So, Edson, I want to direct the first question to you. If you could talk about what was the inspiration of this project?
The inspiration for this project was my mother and her earlier years when she immigrated from Haiti to the US, specifically in Miami, and really wanting to sort of show her slice of life of the multitude of experiences that she had as an immigrant here in Miami, but more specifically as a private caretaker. She worked an assortment of different jobs. But it is her space in the healthcare industry that really took to me.
Thank you. And Shane and Fabiola, if you could talk about how you became involved with Ludi.
Shane, do you want to go first?
Okay. I had worked with the director and writer before on another project that was also in Miami, Florida. That also had Haitian American characters in it. And so they had learned that I was also Haitian and sort of had me in mind, I believe, to play the role. for Ludi.
So I jumped on board sort of in a maybe a little untraditional way. Edson received a grant to make Ludi from Ulite Arts, which is a local organization here in South Florida. It's one of the largest arts supporting organization in town. And so Edson won the grant or the award, and then he had to compile a team. So when he sort of compiled the team, that's how we met, and we sort of took it from there.
Great, thank you. And so, Edson, in terms of just the overall story and the details, some things that really stand out to me is the back and forth with the tape recorder, which I think brings about some poignant moments. With Ludi's internal thoughts about how she's experiencing her time in the United States, and then in addition to that, it sets the context for how Ludi is seeking to work as many hours as she can so she can send money back to support her family. And then we learn about the additional job that she takes on, so that she can make her money. And it's a very, challenging endeavor that she has with this elderly man. I'm just curious to know, how the details of the film came together for you, and how you wanted to visualize it.
The details really were just really laid before me. I think just it's something that had been developed and continues to develop inside of Haitian culture and Haitian American culture specifically. And these nuances are just sort of things that I've picked up growing up, and I just want to capture and remember sort of through filmmaking, because I find that some of our old traditions or cultural nuances that have come from being immigrants in this country dissipate with the time, dissipate with technology. So being strategic about adding that nuance is something that's very synonymous with not all Haitians, but a large number of Haitians that left Haiti to be in the United States around the 90s. That was the means of communication with family back home. That and like telephone cards. So it was like cassette recording, then it went to telephone cards, cassette recording out. But then cassette recording was still used in sort of like a more endearing kind of way, where it wasn't necessarily to get news across, but sometimes if you wanted to sing or send, just not have essentially a time limit on your conversation because the phone cards were terrible and you were always running out of time. It was something that was used a lot. And I grew up thinking for a long time it was just my family. But then with further readings and like experiences with other Haitian creatives, I found out that a lot of Haitians were doing this. Even people in my same community, like down the street, like I didn't know that those nuances were happening in their home. So a lot of those details were things that were just, that exist in our culture. And I'm just like, sort of like holding on to them and being like, let's reflect those and just reflect those experiences.
Thanks. And, I think with the cassette recorder, it just adds such a personal touch, to the communication between Ludi and her family back home. Shane, if you could talk about, how, when you first read the script for the film, how you understood the character to be, and, as you went from reading the script to, performing the character, what was that journey like for you, in terms of becoming Ludi?
Well, when Edson first told me about the story, he told me it was based on his mom. So when I went in reading it, I was expecting to just understand his mom a little better, and based on things that he's told about me before. He's told me about her before in the past. But as I read it, I started seeing my own mother in it, and like just the women in my family in general. So really there wasn't a lot of research to be done, as much as there was just sort of recollecting and just sitting there and thinking about the stories that my parents have told me, remembering seeing my mom come in from work, change clothes, and then go to work again to her next job. And then just reflecting on the Haitian women in my community. Just this story was everyone's story that I had grown up with. So it hit so close to home that it kind of just felt very natural, very dropped in for me.
That's quite powerful. And what's interesting with you, Shane, and Edson, is just just how much of your personal experience really helps bring this film to life. Things that you collect from your own memories and how you presented in this story for all of us to see. Fabiola, as a producer on the film, what steps did you see necessary to for this project to have a successful completion?
Successful completion. Well, I think I know for me, I think it's the whole thing. So even now, even, sort of post-production, distribution, the festival circuit, all that, it still keeps going. And, I always say that my job is to have the film outlive us, and, doing my best to, try to do things in a way strategically that will allow for that. But I want to sort of go back to the question that you mentioned about Shane and what Shane just mentioned. I know when I read the script, I'm an immigrant. I immigrated with my family when I was 6 years old when my family moved to Miami. So I was 6 and my sister, I have an older sister, she was 10. And Ludi, the character, says that she was 10 years old when she arrived in the US. So I know for me, I felt that kind of connection, that Shane was sort of speaking to as well, even though I am not Haitian American, so I think that's really interesting. And I think that really speaks to the script, which was written by Edson and Joshua Jean-Baptiste. That I'm reading it and I was like, oh, this is my this is me and my family. This is my older sister, or or some of the other things, sort of the way Ludi's character and some of the challenges she has with her coworkers. Even though I myself am not Haitian American, there's so many things that are so relatable, regardless of sort of your where you're from or your life experiences.
Indeed. And question, given that, this is a virtual festival, this premiered at South by Southwest a few months back. And again, when the Milwaukee Film Festival is honored to show it on our platform. And a couple of questions with regards to the pandemic. First, how much of, how much work had you done on this film prior to the pandemic? Was it all, did you have much of it done, or did you have to work through the pandemic to complete the film?
It was pretty much half and half. We were fortunate enough to finish principal photography just before the pandemic. Well, before things shut down, because in reality, the pandemic was kind of happening before, but US was a little late. So we had finished principal in February. Things shut down in March. And then entire post was, we went through post-production basically throughout the lockdown and quarantine, which was a benefit because we were able to slow things down, really revisit different cuts, build relationships. So it was a blessing.
Mm-hmm. And just another question with respect to the pandemic, and in this film is more so just the additional context with regards to the focus on healthcare workers having to work through COVID, and then also with the senior citizens, being a high risk population. With regards to COVID, now that this film is available for the world to see, and now that we've had those particular narratives be at the forefront, I'm just curious to know, do you think that as a do you think that adds a greater context to the film? And this question is to any of you.
I mean, I'll jump in, and I think definitely it would definitely happen in a serendipitous sort of way or unexpected sort of way, because we were just reflecting just true life experiences of our the generation before it, or of our mothers, and essentially they were first responders, they were healthcare workers, and it became something that sort of definitely, I think, increases and widens the scope and the reach of the film, and even the attention that audience paid to the film, because there's a different kind of respect for those individuals. And I still believe like society in large can even take a larger step in that direction beyond just respect, as far as like setting up systems that support these individuals. But definitely, I feel like it definitely does widen, and it changed the scope of the film. And we see that a lot in press clippings and the way festivals engage with the film. It's a big narrative that is attached to it.
Shana, I have a question for you with regards to building chemistry with the variety of actors that you work with on this film. How did you go about cultivating that?
Oh, it's super easy. Super easy. Everyone was really fun. Alan Heyman plays George, and I wish everyone had the pleasure of meeting him, because he's just the most energized, full of life, very funny, the loudest person on set, has the most energy. Like, he was great off rip immediately. And here I was thinking, oh, I'm gonna be working with this old guy, and I gotta, like, I don't know, be respect. I don't know what I was thinking. I just wasn't expecting this great bundle of awesomeness. And then my other two of my castmates are comedians. So if you could imagine how fun that was, being on set with them, like just nonstop comedy show on set. And then a bunch of lovely women, all very nice, empowering, uplifting. Everyone was so encouraging on set. I got so much poured into me on set. I'm so eternally grateful for my castmates. Like probably the best experience I've had thus far to date.
That's awesome. And before I ask my last question, Ludi is shown through 3 programs within the Milwaukee Film Festival: American Independence, Cine Sin Fronteras, and Black Lens. And I thought it was important to Ludi to be shown in Black Lens, was because I think with Black Lens, we try to show a variety of Black experiences on screen, in terms of stories, in terms of different styles of filmmaking. And, you all spoke about the immigrant experience, being at the forefront of this film. And that's the key reason why I was excited to have Ludi be in the festival, but also to be able to promote it through the Black Lens program, as well as Cine Sin Fronteras and American Independence. So, I thought, it was certainly a vital film to have in our program. And so my final question is for each of you. What are some other what's another project or projects that you have on the horizon?
I'll jump in really quick about that comment that you said about Black Lens, because it's something that I really appreciate that we're sort of included in that. And also shout out to Haiti, because it's Haitian Flag Day today.
Yay!
So it's also very symbolic in that regard, as far as Haiti just being really and like our establishing that independence. This is not our independence celebration. However, it does remind me of that, the ripple effects of us, specifically the Africans on that island, establishing independence and fighting for their freedom, and how that created a ripple effect around the world. So yeah, it's all connected. So I definitely just wanted to piggyback off what you were saying.
Certainly. Anything either of you have coming up that we should look out for in the near future?
Well, I think I don't know if it's been announced, but Shane's going to be in Black Panther 3, so that's definitely
Awesome.
He's lying.
so that's definitely something we're excited about. There is a second project that's coming up, and it's a true life drama set in Miami, so it's something that we're really excited about. Heavy subject matter, but an important, another very nuanced Haitian family story that we want to share with the world.
Awesome.
And hopefully Shane and I will join that project, right?
Hopefully, please cross my fingers.
Yeah, speak that into existence.
Yes.
So, Edson, Shane, Fabiola, once again, thank you for making this film a reality. And again, thanks for making this available for the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We
Yes,
appreciate
yes,
it.
thanks for programming it.
Absolutely. Yep. And now would like to call forth Anna Sampers. She is our programming administrative director, and she is the official guru of Milwaukee Film for all things short. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dante. Yes, I am the Programming Administration Director for Milwaukee Film. Pronouns are she, her. And it is my pleasure to welcome to the screen the director for one of our short films screening in our Let's Get Animated program, the short film Coup D'Etat Math. And I'll be talking to director Sai Selvarajan.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Hi, welcome.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
To kick things off, can you tell us what was the inspiration behind this project?
Well, I think the impetus, or what's started it is when the Muslim ban happened, in late 2016, and as an immigrant, it really hit home, and and I was like, I have to make a film about immigrants, and I just started writing a lot of ideas on how I could tackle that and everything. So that's what really started it, and then I just spent 2017 writing and trying to figure out what kind of film to make, and then because I just felt we're here in Texas, and we share a border with Mexico, so immigration is always a topic here, and as an immigrant myself, it's just a thing that we always deal with. And I feel like the experience, and I tell people all this, when you immigrate, it's an infinite journey. It's not just getting here, so once you're here, then another journey starts, but it's still part of this whole thing, and so I wanted to really dive into that, and in a very macro level, to where you can really feel these stories, so yeah.
Yeah, great. And so the story the short film tells 4 stories, correct? 4 stories?
Yes, it's 4. Yes,
four
it's 4.
stories.
Yeah.
Are they true stories? Were they based on a true story? Did you do different interviews, or are they all purely from your imagination?
Yeah, they're all true stories. They're they're all true stories. The first one's actually mine, and then it goes on. But I to make them general and to where people could relate to it, I didn't want it to be about, hey, this is John Doe, this is his story, or this is whoever. So it's about the experience, and not about a certain person and coming from a certain country, because like when you hear it's a immigrant from here or here or here, there's all this baggage, and people have their opinions, and immigrants are just immigrants, you know what I mean? And I wanted to have this kind of just this general feel of hey, let's not get caught up in where they came from, what are their names, gender, all that, so yeah.
Yeah, it's great to hear you talk about that, because I definitely felt that as I was watching it. They're specific stories, and yet it seems very relatable. It seems like this could be, like you were saying, this could be anyone's story. Everyone could have a version of this story with slightly different circumstances.
Right.
You change the country, you change the gender, you change slight things about it, and people can really relate to it. So yeah, it's great to hear you talk about it. And the animation is amazing, so gorgeous, so. I love the way that it's different for each story. It's so specific to each story. It evokes such a great feeling that is specific to each story. Can you talk about the animation process?
Totally. So once I had all 4 stories kind of written out, and I was gonna tell them in this way, I wanted them to have their own language, their own like visual language. So I kind of started with coming up with these like mood boards, of like, this story is going to look like this story is going to look like this, and then like reasons for that, like the one about the rice in the hand. It's a very tactile story, it's very textured, and so that's why I went with like, real watercolor paintings, because I wanted people to feel the pulp of the paper, the water, just like, if someone put rice in your hand, it's a very tactile thing. So there were styles for each story, but then I had like reasons for each of them too. So like the first one is very like infographic, and I just wanted it because, it's been my story forever. And so I wanted to tell it almost like a clinical way of like, this happened, the water broke, there was a curfew, boom, boom, boom. So it's very infographic. And then, so I came up with the style, and then I also then was like, each style has to have a reason for why it's there, and not just to look cool or whatever, so.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Well, it's so beautiful. I was rewatching it today in preparation for this Q&A, and I, was catching little things within each of the stories that the animation was picking up on, and yeah, just so wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about what the writing process was like? You said there were 2 stories, but there's such great lines within each story that are so powerful and just really, hit me when I was watching it. Can you talk about what the writing process was like?
Sure. It was just, I was trying to come up with lines that would, like sum up each story. I kind of started with a log line, and then a certain, also I had a visual language, but also I wanted to have a way for these actors to like read this, so it's not just from the same voice, so it was a lot of trying to come up with, okay, so this story is about this, how am I gonna like tell it, and so I knew it was, earlier on I had said, immigration is an infinite journey, so I had this circle on my pad, and I kept going, okay, so I feel like the story should also come full like circle. And, if you watch the films, it starts with a birth of a child and it ends with a death of a child, and it's kind of this circle. So I was looking at stuff inside the stories, but also there was going to be this like through line for all of them, so, but it was a lot, because like all of them were like 5 or 6 pages, and it was a lot of just editing, and, with animation, you can't be fat because you have to like animate all that, so I had to get really like brutal and just get in there and be like, how can I tell this in 1 page, so I started fat, and it was a lot of notes and emotions, and it wasn't good, and it was just like editing until it like I felt like, and then like sending it out to like, people I trusted and saying, hey, does this story come through? Is this, these have to be like efficient, you know, and I have to be able to tell this in one page and then move on to the next thing. So it was a lot of that. I just remember a lot of editing, you know, and, you know, I mean, the last 4 years were really like emotional. There was a lot of anger, a lot of emotion. So it all was on there on the page, and, you know, it's not always good, right? You know, and so you just have to keep. So, but it was very cathartic to get these like emotions and these stories out, you know, and be able to tell, you know, and like humanize immigrants, you know, and go, hey, you know, it's not all about just leaving your country and coming here. This, like, sometimes it's just one thing that happens and then you got to go, you know, and so,
yeah. Well, the end product is so powerful, and yeah, you did a very good job editing them down, because it really is. Each story comes on and kind of punches you in the gut, and then wraps it up, and we move on to the next. But there is just this beautiful through line throughout.
Thank you.
So, yeah, very well done. You mentioned a little bit the actors that you cast to give voice to these stories. Can you talk about that process of finding those actors?
Yeah, and so most of the Spanish speaker at the end was not an actor, you know, and so I just wanted it to feel real and not feel like somebody trying to like emote that. Especially that one, to me, is the saddest one, right? And so like I have a friend who teaches art in a Hispanic area here in Dallas, and so I reached out to her and I was like, hey, do you know anybody who has a voice that just has this kind of, you know, just a kind of a sadness kind of built in, you know, and not that I was looking for a sad person, but just like a kind of, you know, a voice that has a lot of like gravity, you know. And so she actually had 2 teachers there, and so they both read it, you know, and then I chose one. And so it was a lot of trying to find people that would match it, you know. And so the second story is an Irish accent, you know, and I was listening to a podcast and I heard her, you know, and I really liked her voice. So I just emailed her and I was like, hey, I know you're not a voice actor, but I really like this. So if you could read the script for me. And she did, you know, so it was just like finding them and, you know, just, yeah. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it happened somewhat organically, which
which is great.
Turned out really well.
That happens, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite part about working on this project? It was like it was very personal to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was that, and then watching it all come together, you know, I think was just because, like, even after I had it written, you know, I thought it's still going to be trying to like animate all 4 stories in different styles, getting people, and I had a composer, and, you know, I was like, each film has to have 4 different feels, you know, but then we have to like blend them into each other. And so I felt like every step, it was like a tall order, you know, and somehow with, you know, it takes a village, right? You know, so there were people just were coming up to like help me, you know, composers, you know, the last one is like woodcut, you know, and so I reached out to a friend who does like woodcuts, you know, and I was like, you know, can I see your portfolio? I would love to like animate that, you know. So it was a ton of people just saying, yeah, here you go, like you can use this, you know. And so I think that to me was just like, you know, to see that it was a team effort, and even though it started with me, it took a whole village to make this film, you know. So
yeah, that's great. Very much in the spirit of the short itself.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
And what are you working on next? What's next for you in the pipeline?
Yeah, next up, I'm working with some PBS affiliates, you know, to try to turn this into maybe a series, you know, where we get immigrants to like write us, you know, their like stories, and then we edit them down and then animate them, you know. So I've got that we're trying to like develop and get funding for. And then I had a short in March that it was in South by, you know, and it was a sports doc, and so we're trying to get that also into a series, you know. So just working on that, you know. So yeah.
Oh, both of those projects sound really great. I would be very excited to check them out.
I'll send you the link. Yeah. But I mean, it's just cool to when you have like festivals like yours that reach out and just keep our stories going. You know what I mean? And this is like the perfect outlet for that. You know, so thank you.
Yeah. But thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us tonight, and for allowing us to show your film to our audience.
Of course, yeah.
And with that, I would like to throw it to Ernie Quiros with our next film.
Hello, thank you. And thank you all the filmmakers for joining us tonight. Let's go ahead and bring out our final filmmaker for tonight, writer-director of Fruits of Labor. It is Emily Cohen Ibanez. Emily, how are you?
Hi, Ernie. It's great to see you. Good.
Great to see you again, sort of.
I know.
On the festival circuit. Congratulations on the film, getting a lot of love, as it should be.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's really exciting, and thank you for programming Fruits of Labor at Milwaukee Film Festival. Just really excited about all the momentum and sharing it with audiences across the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously wish you could be here in person, but for the time being, this is a good way to share the film and share Ashley's story and the story of a lot of not necessarily immigrants, but of Mexican American, Latino American, Hispanic Americans, and sort of their struggles, which we'll go ahead and start with. Sir, I guess I'll put it in context. So, my parents, I'm lucky enough that I have a college degree. I'm sure this is a story that you've heard, and a story that a lot of people have told. I'm lucky because of my parents' sacrifices and my grandparents' sacrifices. I'm lucky that I have basically a white collar job, in the industry that I like, arts and film. My parents, they worked in the fields. The Ashley's story is my parents' story. And then going back to my grandparents, they worked in the fields. That's all they did. But every generation, that's sort of the story is you hope they're better off, and you live for that. So talk about your own personal story and sort of why you wanted to tell Ashley's story, and sort of how this is a lot of people's story, and it resonated with me, and how it resonates with people.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Ernie. I didn't know about that your parents were farm workers. I don't think you told me that before. So it's cool as we're getting to know each other through the circuit. So, I'm from an immigrant family from Colombia, from South America. And my parents were first gen in getting college degrees. So I had, a certain amount of privilege in pursuing my education. But I also, growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, dealt with a lot of discrimination, and being in sort of a middle-class white neighborhood and school district. And so I really identified with marginalized communities and our Latino community, our Latinx community. And so that's been sort of a long fight since, I can remember since high school. I was working on issues around farm workers, and got very involved in college with the United Farm Workers, and helping organize a march. There was a strike for strawberry workers in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And just raising awareness about especially women workers. And then I grew up with a single mom. My father died when I was young. And so Ashley, being from a single mom home, there was sort of a connection there. And I just really have had a long interest in workers and how we value work or imagine work in this country, or labor. And why is it that, is now we consider it essential labor even, that people working in the fields who are picking our fruits and vegetables, we all eat. Why is that considered a denigrated form of work? And so for me, my aims are to reimagine that and really get to know the people, hopefully, through Ashley, and it's a coming of age kind of story, that you get to see her as a full person and a woman who is navigating um, her work life and family life, which for so many women, across actually class, and I would even say race and ethnicity, there's women in the workforce. You can't divide. It's very difficult to separate from one's family obligations and family life, and the certain burdens that go along with gender. And so those are I have points of connection, and then there's also differences between Ashley's and my story. But our bond, I've known her and her family for many years, and she knows my family. Both of our moms' names are Beatriz. We had an Instagram live when we premiered at South by with the two moms, the Tocayas, talking about their daughters. And then just this last Mother's Day weekend, we all got together. My mom was visiting, and so we all got together, and it was really fun. So yeah, there's that's sort of the connection.
That's great. I had no idea that you were so closely connected with Ashley. That's really great that you were able to now share her story. Yeah, it's again, I think about my family. I think about my mother. My mother was the oldest of the girls of 9. So she was really the second mother to some of the younger kids. And really had to, she made the sacrifices that a lot of, especially young Latinas make in that situation, where all the things like Ashley, she didn't really go to prom. She didn't have all the fun things that a lot of kids in high school do. Because she was helping her mother raise the kids. Yeah, and that seems such a common thing in Mexican American culture and Hispanic culture, Latino culture, is that the women are really the anchors. And I even see it in my sister. My sister is the middle, and since my mom's passing, she's kind of become the anchor of the family.
Yeah.
So that's great. Go ahead.
No, that's true. I mean, it's funny, even, in Colombian families, especially my family is from the Caribbean coast, there's definitely matriarchs, in the family. Of course, in Ashley's situation also becomes, and I think, in these situations, it can also become a great burden, because she has all the expectations to help raise her siblings, and her brother gets to go out and skateboard. And so there's some frustrations there. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about, you didn't go, this wasn't, I don't consider this a very political film. There was a lot of, you could have gone very much in the political realm with DACA and with ICE, but you chose to focus more on, the family and Ashley and sort of the human aspects. Can you talk a little bit more about that, of why maybe you wanted to go that route?
Yeah, for me it is very political, but in a different way.
Yeah.
There's sort of a feminist saying the personal is political. For me, to really show what for women workers, I think it's important to think of family and home life. And so that's why I chose to really focus on family life and that dynamic and those nuances and how that relates to how the responsibilities of this young woman and why she is working in the fields and in doing a night shift at the factory. I mean, there's all these different elements, how poverty, there's issues around poverty and how that gets compounded or plays out in one's family dynamics. So, in that sense, there's a family politics, right? And it's very gendered kind of politic. So for me, I had gotten, it's interesting, some critiques early on. I've had gotten very positive reception with the film, but why isn't this not an expose film? And to me, I think you got to feel her struggle through, and you get to see her work in the fields and when she's going on the night shift of the factory. But I wanted, oftentimes people of color in social issue films become stand-ins for a social issue.
Mhm.
And for me, it was very important to show Ashley as a full person. And coming of age stories, it's sort of this classic American filmmaking genre. And yet I don't see it afforded that much to working women and working women of color. I saw there's like a dearth of that. And so I thought, for this film, I wanted it to be accessible to teenagers, families, and general audiences. So it has a bit of a teen film feel. And I wanted to afford that coming of age story that really allowed for Ashley's complex, layered self. She has a rich internal life. And so that's some of the elements of sort of what can be described as sort of magical, real elements there.
Mhm.
Some of the more poetic moments allow for that kind of deeper understanding. Oh, sorry, my dog is barking, but I don't know if you can hear that. I have the headset on, but but yes, sort of a fuller representation of Ashley. And Ashley participated in the film as a co-writer, and we really deeply worked together, and that was really important, as well as it being the film process as being a space of healing, and that there were moments of joy, that there was joyful filmmaking. That was very important intention from the outset of making the film.
No, I think there are a number of documentaries and films about Cesar Chavez, about
Yes.
Dolores Huerta, and not to say that their stories don't need to be told. I mean, they definitely need to be told and shared even more. But I think it's important to tell, sort of like a ground level view of the issues, and yeah, like you said, like a sort of a more human and a teenage perspective. So that's why I really enjoyed the film.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. It's like we really need the stories of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. I mean, they're icons. We need to focus on them. But we know a little more of the
Mhm.
history here, but we don't necessarily know about what it's like for present day children in a country where we have up to 500,000 children working in the fields.
Yeah, and that's something I had no idea that all the child labor laws that you think of, you think of 1800s or 1900s, child labor was sort of made illegal, but no, the one exception for agriculture workers is just, that was shocking to find that out.
Yes, and it's a vestige of slavery, and that you get a little bit through the teacher in the classroom when she's talking about FDR and in the New Deal, to appease Southern Democrats, and they had Jim Crow. The idea was they wanted FDR to remove that worker protections would be given to Black and brown people in the United States, and they couldn't do that. So then they decided to carve out agricultural labor and domestic labor as two areas that wouldn't get workers protection. So children as young as 12 years old can work in the fields. Actually, it's dangerous. It's considered a work that has a lot of dangers, including exposure to chemicals and pesticides that are often illegally sprayed directly onto people. And so, yeah, that's one of the things. The film is already in June going to be shown to legislators, and been partnering with Justice for Migrant Women, and they're reintroducing now, I think it's for the 11th year, the CARE Act, to raise the age of agricultural labor to 16. So we'll see if on the 11th year try they get it. So the film will be used in part for that.
Well, that's great. I applaud that. I mean, that's just unfathomable. 12 years old. That's just, I can't comprehend that. That not only the danger, but the fact that it takes away from their education, because oftentimes they worked a full day before they even have to get to school, and then you're asking them to then commit to school. It's just any updates on Ashley and sort of the family? We got a little bit of the postscript there at the end, but any further updates?
Well, yeah, Ashley's doing well. She got to speak. She spoke to the high school students with the Milwaukee Film Festival, and then I'm doing this. So it's fun because now we've spoke a lot together, but now we're sort of dividing up, and she took that one on her own, and I'm doing this one. But she's doing very well. She continues with her studies at the community college. And hoping to complete the associates, and she would like to continue to a 4-year. She still works currently as a home aide, but she is focusing on her studies. She loves psychology, Chicano studies, and film. So we'll kind of see, her and I, I meet frequently and figuring out and trying to support on that path. But she's on her path to getting her education. And I see a really bright future for her. And so, yeah, no, it's exciting. I mean, we're going to be traveling together for our first in-person screening in Los Angeles for June 3rd at the Chinese Theater. So we're going to really celebrate. And we'll celebrate her birthday on the 2nd and then have our screening on the 3rd. So we're excited. We're traveling to LA.
Right. It's going to be at La Leaf, right? That's a great festival.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know that POV picked up the film. It's going to air on PBS October, I think, is what I saw. But I mean, you're playing festival circuit everywhere. That's such a great, not just for the film, but to bring this issue to a wider audience. So talk a little bit more about that, about how people can stay on top of the film, stay on top of screens, but stay on top of, like you said, the legislation, some of the other, and maybe even DACA. How can people, what are some resources for people?
Yes. So first, I'd encourage you to go to fruitsoflaborfilm.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there, and we'll be updating. Things are going to be moving quickly with our social impact campaign, as there's 3 different points of legislation that we'll be working on in partnership with Latinx House, the Guadalajara Film Festival, Justice for Migrant Women, and Poderistas. And so to keep an eye out for that, you can follow the newsletter, as well as we have a Facebook page, Fruits of Labor Film. We have a Twitter page, Fruits of Labor, and Instagram, Fruits Labor Film. And that's where we're really going to be spreading the word and keeping people updated on legislation. Right now, the House has passed, or the Immigration Modernization Act, but it's hard to get through the Senate right now. So that's one of the struggles. So there are, there's also the film will be showing on June 10th as a part of the International Day Against Child Labor. So we'll bring it into the conversation of global, conversation around child labor. So there's going to be many points. So please follow us, and we'll keep you updated through those venues. Yes.
And like I said, if nothing else, it's going to be on PBS in October for people to watch, and hopefully spread the word to watch the film.
Yes.
Talk about other projects, maybe not necessarily related to immigration or with migrant workers that you're working on.
Yeah, well, I just finished a short that I'm trying to find a festival home for. Collaborated with a great team with 2 we're mainly Latinx team, and then the editor Cristina Matwani that worked on Fruits of Labor. She's also worked with me on Hogar. It's an 8-minute short about a mom and her son who reflect on the meaning of home after being unhoused for a year in San Francisco. And it was a commissioned work, and we're just trying to find that festival home and distribution for it. And then there's other commissioned works that I'm doing related to criminal justice. I'm finishing up something right now for Independent Lens. It's a short as well. And yeah, doing a lot of sort of shorts work.
Yeah.
And
Are all these
yeah.
nonfiction or fiction or both?
So there's sort of both. There's one, my first script out of South by, and I was approached by an agent, and we'll see how this works out. But I'm writing a script, my first feature fiction script.
Wow.
So I'm hoping, we'll see what happens. You know, I need to kind of look at all the opportunities, but that's something I love, doc, and I want to be, and I love writing, and I want to be able to move between those.
Yeah.
Is the idea.
Well, how about directing nonfiction? You said you want to write. Ever direct a non-documentary?
Oh, well, I would love
I meant
to.
fiction. Did I say nonfiction? Yeah, I meant, yeah. Directing fiction. Yeah.
I would love to, you know, I have to see what opportunities this thing, they said maybe I could direct. They wanted me to write it. But I would love to direct fiction. And, you know, in many ways, the ways that I work in documentary, depending on the venue, but for Fruits of Labor, you know, we did so many experiments, and there was aspects of what I would think of taken from narrative film. And actually my references were really fiction novels and narrative film to, you know, in making Fruits of Labor. So I hope so. We'll see what opportunities come
there are
my way.
definitely those poetic moments and some beautiful cinematography, beautiful music, beautiful editing. Curious, what were some of the films and novels that were the inspiration?
The biggest inspiration for me is Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I kind of made her, you know, I think we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And I decided to make her my kind of North Star ancestor to rely on, and really thinking, what were the conversations happening around when her book was released, being a woman kind of coming of age story, and there's elements of love and romance. And at the time of the Harlem Renaissance, she was critiqued for not doing sort of what would be considered harder hitting, I don't know, political expression around the Black experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, she was a real anchor. And I've read the book probably 100 times. I used to teach it because I used to teach anthropology. And so I love that book, and that was a real reference. And you know, we have a great team of executive producers. One of them, Aurora Guerrero, and her film Mosquita y Mari, I really, especially in the beginning of dreaming up the film, would consult a lot with her about sort of the coming of age sort of genre, and thinking of sort of different moments of you know, thinking through that. And then I was teaching at the time, actually, for the Latino Film Institute, high school students on fiction writing and narrative and how to write a fiction film. And so I think that, you know, influenced the ways I was thinking about telling this story as I was working with teens.
Yeah, no, it's definitely adds a whole nother dimension to the film, like a poetry and beauty that just you know, draws you in into the story. So, well, thank you, Emily, so much for joining us for this conversation. We could probably talk so many issues that we could talk about, but we are out of time. I want to go ahead and thank all the other filmmakers that appeared tonight. Let's see, real quick. That's Fabiola, Edson, Sheehan, Sai, and then of course Emily. Want to thank my co-hosts, Want to thank the ASL interpreters, and want to thank Kelsey behind the scenes for running the tech. So, but thank mostly to you out there in streaming land for joining us for this conversation, for watching these films. 2 more days left in the Milwaukee Film Festival, so plenty of time to watch films. Once again, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the films at the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival.